Hello, welcome everybody to New Hampshire Peace Actions, Peace and Justice Conversation Series online. I'm Will Hopkins, Executive Director. And in case you are new to the organization, which I don't think anybody is today, our mission statement, and this will probably be the last conversation series where this mission statement is still our mission statement. We're in the final stages of revising. But our mission is to contribute to creating a world in which nuclear disarmament, mutual security, global understanding, international cooperation, and respect for human rights create social, economic, and environmental benefits for all. We have all experienced the upheavals of 2020, and they have brought us to a new moment of reckoning and possibility. So we started this bi-weekly conversation series back in June, and it's intended to engage and help us sort out with how we make the changes we've been yearning for. Tonight, we are bringing you Erika Perez, who is standing in for Griffin Sinclair Wingate, who forgot to write this in his planner and took a week of vacation. So Griffin was kind enough to hook us up with Erika, who is the legislative organizer for New Hampshire Youth Movement and a co-founder of Black Lives Matter Manchester. We're very excited for the stand-in, especially since Griffin has promised he will make a point of coming back to us later on to talk about something else. We a bit on Zoom etiquette. We are happy to have your face on if you're willing to, but do be aware that this is being live streamed. So folks will see it, and you can turn off your camera if you don't want that. You're welcome when we get to Q&A to either chime right in and be recognized and have your question directly, or to put it in the chat. We'll also be monitoring the Facebook chat for questions that we will bring to Erika so that we can advance the conversation. So without further ado, Erika, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And we appreciate your time so much. Why should we work with youth?
So that's a great question. I mean, I feel like there are definitely sort of like biases that everybody carries just naturally. Sort of this idea that, like, you know, young organizers, they come in, they're arrogant, they think that they know more. And honestly, I have had like a hard time sort of like moving away from that, of this idea of like, I know what I'm doing, I know how to organize, look at all these successful events that I've planned, and not listening to the people who have been doing this for years and acting like their input is like not necessarily like the most important input there is. So I feel like I'm just gonna like start out, if that's okay, by like easing into the answer. So basically, my name's Erika. I know I was just introduced, but hi. And yes, I work for New Hampshire Youth Movement. And then in my free time, I do work with BLM. And the way that I came into organizing, and the way that all people hopefully come into organizing, is sort of on accident. Is like, you care about something deeply, or something hurts you, or something affects you, or you see something and you know that it isn't right, like basic human stuff, like something in your gut tells you that something's wrong and you want to do something about it. And I think that that's a very powerful thing that we all have the ability to do. And so in 2016, when I had just graduated high school, I was like probably like 2 or 3 weeks out of high school. I was 17 years old. Me and my friends accidentally planned this 400 person BLM march in Manchester as a response to the sort of grief and pain that we were feeling at the loss and murder of Philando Castile. In that moment, you don't really think like, oh, I'm doing this because I want something out of it. It was very much coming from a place of like anger. It was very much coming from a place of like, well, I have to do something. And this is like the something that we decided to do. We had no intention of becoming an organization. We had no intention of, or honestly, even like the knowledge or just like anything tangible to hold on to like fight for Black lives in New Hampshire. We didn't know how to do that because we were children, we were kids, we were 17, we were 16, we were 18. We had no idea what we were doing. And what little we did know was coming from people who had been doing it for years. So like beforehand, before the march itself, we had people who were showing us how to de-escalate and showing us how to protect ourselves, and just like all of these like very valuable tools that you wouldn't have unless you were in an organizing space. And people were nice enough to sort of come in and be like, we are going to teach you because it is obvious that this is going to snowball into something. And after that event, I was meeting a lot of people and they were like, oh, this is so great. Like, you're gonna save New Hampshire. And that was scary. And I think that that's something that people tend to do and put on to young people, is sort of like, hey, we're done. Like, we're good. Like, it's your turn to like take over this like big heavy thing that we've been carrying. Like, it's up to you now. And I feel like that was such a scary thing when I was a kid. Which was honestly not that long ago. I was 17, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. But what's my point? This is gonna be a lot of rambling. I wasn't supposed to be the speaker, so I'm sorry. Usually I would be a little more organized. So yeah, so that's how I got into organizing. It was an accident. And my point being is that I feel like a lot of young people that get into organizing, you know, they don't mean to get into organizing. They are mad. They're looking for an outlet. Like, they're looking for the reason why things are so messed up. And I feel like right now we're sort of living in this like intense hot cluster of just the messed upness of the world. And like, we all knew that being an adult was going to be hard, but we didn't realize it was going to be this hard. And we didn't realize that like inflation didn't keep up with us. And we didn't realize that we would have so much student debt. And we didn't realize that racism could get so bad that we're just like watching people die in the streets. And it's all amplified by social media. And it's all amplified by the fact that you literally cannot escape the news anymore. And so people my age have grown up in sort of this cluster of it's getting worse, and sort of as a way of acclimating and trying to stay safe and sort of like looking around at our surroundings. Like, you develop a trauma response to the bad news, is like, you have to tap into what's going on because you have no choice, because the world's happening without you, and bad things are going to keep happening without you, whether or not you know they're happening. So people, especially after Trump got elected, realized that they had to start paying attention, especially people my age. People my age are very into politics. They know what's going on. They know about budgets. They're very into elections. They'll throw down, they'll send text messages. And we do that because we want to see the world get better. Like, we haven't yet given up on the idea that like it could get better, that we could come united as people. At least that's why I keep organizing, because harm reduction is real. And if we could get Joe Biden into office, then that meant something for someone like me. Like, if we could just reduce harm just a little bit, even if it's not exactly what I wanted, because we could always do more. What is my point? My point is that, yeah, what is my point? Basically, so yeah, it very much is like coming from a place of passion. But with all this information that we've been like surrounded with this entire time, I feel like we've sort of gone into our little clusters. Like, people, like, for example, when I want someone to know about a bill, this is something that I've been doing all week because I'm the legislative organizer for NHYM, is that when I want someone to know about a bill, I'll create an infographic about it and I will put it on Instagram, and then that graphic will go viral. Suddenly, 2,000 people know about this horrible transphobic bill that's going around. That's something that happened yesterday. My graphic went viral. Now all of these people have signed in, they've signed up to testify against the bill. That's creating tangible change within our state. That's something that that committee is gonna have to hear about. Whereas if I didn't do that, here are these 2,000 people that wouldn't know about it. And I feel like if the older and younger generation could sort of tap into each other's knowledge of how to organize, because it's such a different tactic. Like, I feel like youth organizing very heavily relies on social media. It very heavily relies on the people you already know. It very heavily relies on people showing up because they saw something. And I feel like the thing that like theaters young people away from working with the older generation is feeling like they're not going to necessarily understand the tactic, that it'll be too much, or it'll be too radical, or the messaging will be too intense or too violent. And it's like the closer and closer we get to this sort of like utopian way of thinking of like the wokeness of what we're saying, etc. Like maybe you don't use the right word, suddenly you're not allowed in a space. It's very interesting. I'm gonna look at the chat because I know Louise wrote something. What are the best vehicles for reaching out? Instagram and Twitter? Yeah, I think so, honestly. Like a bulk of my organizing has to do with social media. Like I said, like infographics, sort of like putting information out there. How are you supposed to know about something if no one told you? And we're like living in this world where we are being isolated from each other in sort of like, in this sort of like unprecedented way because of Corona, that if we aren't actively looking for the truth, we won't get it. So like making sure that you're like tapping into your community, etc., is like super important. Griffin wanted me to talk about voting, so I will. There's this like idea, and it's a true idea, that like that young people and people of color are sort of like the saviors of any election, that young people and people of color have to vote in order for us to get progressives into office. And something that I'll touch on like just while I'm here is that like they are expected, young people and people of color are expected to be progressives because of the situations that they are in. And that's something that I find kind of unfair. You can't expect a young person to be a progressive just because they're young, just like how you can expect a Black person to feel like racism affects them just because they're a Black person. But that is something that's expected of us, even though we are constantly let down by this system, even though the system is constantly telling us, no, like we're not going to do anything about the police, and we're not going to do anything about student debt. We're not going to do anything about the fact that our minimum wage is still $7.25 in New Hampshire. We are constantly told no. Federally, yes, but also locally. And I think that that's pretty wild to expect that transaction so easily when we've been so often like betrayed in that transaction. So, but it's like the youth and people of color like got Biden elected, like statistically they did. And I think that that's just something to like hold on to, especially since right now, currently, I think like on Thursday, I might be wrong right now, but it's definitely this week. They're attacking student voting rights. Like they're literally attacking student voting rights. They're trying to get rid of same-day registration, and they're trying to make it harder for students who live here all year, but like go home to their home state for vacations. They're making it harder for them to vote. At first, it was like you have to register your vehicle here, and now you have to prove that you pay in-state tuition. So it's just another hoop for young people to go through just to vote, which is very interesting. Yes. And another thing Griffin wanted me to touch on, I'm just like going through. So basically, so it's like here you have, we need young people and BIPOC people to vote, to save us, to elect these progressive people, etc. And then you have our red state and these bills that are attacking voting rights. And it's not even just student voting rights. If you really think about it, they're really attacking the voting rights of the working class. Because how many jobs do you know will let you take time off during your day to go to City Hall during working hours at 9 to 5 so that you can register to vote. Not many people. And New Hampshire already makes it hard to vote because we don't have registration online like the majority of other states. So it's like you have all this happening. Meanwhile, voting isn't enough. And I think we all know that. I feel like I recognize a decent amount of you. So I feel like people here understand that voting isn't enough and that like action is required and narrative shifting is required. And it's sad that it's still necessary to prove to people that some people need human rights and some people need more money and people should be able to rest when they're sick. It's just like basic humanity stuff, like nothing crazy. And the fact that New Hampshire is sort of doubling down and like putting its feet in the ground and saying like, no. But I think I'm fairly new to organizing. So I had an experience, like collaborating in coalitions. And so I've never really worked outside of my bubble of young people or Black people. And so when I started to collaborate with other organizations, it was sort of like, I'm overwhelmed by sort of like the fake rules that exist in organizing and the fake structure and the fake don't say this and the fake do say this and the narrative. And I think that all of that sort of, it really creates this culture of like inaccessibility. And I think that that's something that people my age are trying to tear down. It's like, if I'm angry about something, why should I sound smart when I'm yelling about it? Like, who do I owe sounding smart to? And why are dumb people not allowed to be angry at their government? Like, why should I have a degree to write a letter to my governor? Like, I see no reason why, if I'm a resident of this state, that I can't just be angry and allow that to be enough. And I think that that's sort of the mindset that we need to go into, is that like, you're not better than anybody. And I think that that's what it really is sort of letting go of your ego and organizing. That's something that I had actually like thought about. I feel like maybe y'all will appreciate this. I read Franny and Zoe and I lost my mind. And basically what happened when I read Franny and Zoe is when she's panicking, sort of like in the first part of the book, when she's panicking and she's saying like, we do all of these things all of the time and it's all for us and it's all for our ego and it's all about the way people see us. And I had to really take a good look at myself and say, how much of this am I doing for other people? Because that's all organizing should be, is doing something for somebody else. Because if you're doing it for yourself, then you need to take a step away and reconfigure your life, essentially, because you're not always going to win. And so if you're doing it for yourself, you're always going to feel like you're losing. But if you're doing it for a friend, then you got to feel like you're going to do it again, even if you lose again. And I needed a tangible win, and like, we need tangible wins. That's like the other thing that is like super real, is like, we're not always going to win, but we should win sometimes, you know? Dang, I'm sorry. But basically I'm just like, we're not always going to win, and that's okay. But we can't accept something small as a win, because then they're going to always give us something small. So if we wanted, I'm sorry, I don't know where you all lie, but it's like, if we wanted Bernie and then we watched them do this whole weirdo run around, we watched 3 people drop out, and somehow we end up with Joe Biden, who was dead last at the beginning. How do we end up with Joe Biden? And it's because he's palatable enough. And it's because the Democratic Party allows things like this to happen, because they don't care about going further into the future, because they're scared too. I'm frankly tired of it. But, and I think that if we stopped saying that everything was okay all the time, that we would win more. And I think that that's the problem. Even now, even with Governor Sununu, people like Governor Sununu. Genuinely, people like Governor Sununu, and it's because people are always talking about how great he is, and no one else is ever talking about the bad things that he does. And it's like, I know Ken Street does a lot on narrative, shout out to Louise who's on this call, but it's like, before I started organizing, I thought Governor Sununu was okay because he didn't spend all day dragging Democrats. But if he said even one word about Democrats, he would lose. And that's the sort of just like people aren't okay just because they're nice, you know? Like, sure, I'm sure he's nice. Like, I'm sure he's nice, but he also like destroys the lives of like New Hampshire, like working folk, like single-handedly, like all the time, and like laughs about it in his big house. Like, it's a little ridiculous. And like the veto graveyard, like that was like the first New Hampshire organizing that I had ever seen. Like that was before I even like considered myself an organizer. I saw that and I was like, that's incredible. Like that's amazing. Like I wonder who did that. Because it really does open your eyes to the stuff that's happening in our state. And that's the kind of organizing I want to do. I want someone to see something that I did and I want them to know why I was mad. And I think that that's like the basis of organizing. That's how you reach people. I definitely have not been following my vaguely made template that I set up for this call. But I'm, and then I'm going to open it up so that we could like have a greater discussion. But yeah, I feel like we all carry our own power in organizing and that we should feel like we own that power. Like, it's so easy to feel helpless these days. It's so easy to feel like we're not going to get anywhere. We're too divided as a country, or we don't understand each other. Because honestly, like we're all mad about the same things. Like there's no way that like general base idea, people are mad because they don't have enough money. People are mad because they can't afford food. Like people are mad because gas is expensive. Like we're all mad about the same things. We just have different solutions to the problem. And if we could find this sort of middle ground to walk on together, like we're going to get somewhere. And I truly believe that we can get there. And I'm always like doing this like weird fake inspirational thing where I'm just like, united we can, or whatever, like whatever Obama was saying in 2008. But I'm just like, I really believe that. Like, I really think that like New Hampshire is dope. And I think that like there are a lot of amazing people in New Hampshire. And I think that there's a reason why every primary like Bernie won. And I think it's New Hampshire really does want like to be better and to be progressive. And I think that it's weighed down because people don't pay attention to local politics. And I'm like smashing that in my generation. Yeah, so I would love to sort of like open it up at this point because I feel like I've just been talking, but I would like love to talk to y'all and like hear about your experience in organizing and all that.
Thank you so much, Erika. That was inspired. You had me grinning ear to ear a few times in that. There have been a few questions in the chat that I'm going to bring forward before we open the floor. And I think the first is from Louise. She wants to know, what are the best vehicles for reaching out? Instagram, Twitter, and she goes on to which are the best social media tools?
I find that I really like Instagram and Twitter. It really depends on who you're trying to reach. I find that if you're trying to reach people who are older than 30 years old, Facebook is where you have to be. And then Twitter is sort of like niche, but if you hashtag NH politics, like people in New Hampshire will find you because that's what they're interested in. So if you post anything New Hampshire politics, you're on Twitter, you want people to see it, hashtag NH politics, people will see it. And as far as Instagram goes, Instagram's a little trickier because you have to be adorable to go viral. Like you have to be cute. Not yourself, but the stuff that you're posting. So for example, I posted, let me get to it, this infographic. And as you can see, it's like fun. It was for the trans bill. It got like almost 1,300 likes. So it's like, if you make stuff really digestible and easy for people, like a what's going on, what's wrong, what does it mean, here's how you sign up to oppose a bill, and like a screenshot of exactly what it's supposed to look like people will respond to that. But Instagram is definitely harder to get people to engage on if you're not like already in that like community.
Another question from Louise. I'm amazed that young people and BIPOC keep coming back and engaging. What inspires you?
I feel like for me, it's I want to know that I tried. That's like really what it is for me. Like, I don't think that I could like live with myself if I didn't like really make a solid attempt at trying to make life easier for everyone else.
That speaks to me. That's exactly how I feel too. So thank you, Erica. And you are trying so hard and doing, and not only trying, but succeeding. So thank you.
Dang, thanks, Louise. That was really nice of you.
Feel free to chime right in, folks. Let's have a conversation. I'm, you know, I part of our strategic. I was telling you before the event that part of New Hampshire's New Hampshire Peace Action's strategic plan is that we were, for the first 5 or 6 years I was the director, heavily engaged in youth work. And as New Hampshire youth movement has built itself with a few of the folks who were involved in our youth program at in leadership positions, I've pulled back from that. And part of our strategic plan was that's work that's actually really important to our members and that matters. How would you recommend a group that has a few connections with youth gets more engaged?
With youth?
Yeah, how do we get back into it? How do we as an organization get back into that space?
I feel like it's harder to engage youth than it should be. Like, they're kind of stubborn and like don't like, I feel like the whole like, oh, they're stubborn, like that's real. And like, it's hard to get people to engage in stuff that doesn't seem like super attractive all the time. I would say, honestly, like, real opinion, if you like, for example, like, it was like an event with Ken Street BLM and NHYM, like just having events and like being like a co-host of an event, that will give you some traction. So like, if like the Peace Action like wanted to do an event with like NHYM, like that would be enough. And then people would be like, oh, what's Peace Action? And then you could be like, this is what my org's all about. Like, do you want to be a part of it? Yeah.
Cool. Can you tell us about some of the legislative things in New Hampshire that you're going to be focusing on over the next couple of months? Some of the things that, as legislative organizer for New Hampshire Youth Movement, some of the bills that you've identified that you'll be working on coming up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk to you about that. Let me just pull it up. So I'm just on my way. So this week, today, Josie was representing a cannabis bill, HB 350, that would allow home grow for medical patients. Tomorrow, I'm going to be defending House Bills 160 and 550. One of them would require 60-day notice for a rent increase, and then the other one would be relative to non-payment of rent during a state of emergency, which we all know we're in a pandemic. Wednesday is the trans bill that would define gender affirmative care, which is like medically transitioning as child abuse if you're under 18. Even if your parent was okay with you transitioning, it would just be labeled child abuse to be supportive of your trans child. Minimum wage is up on Friday, I believe, HB 107 and 517, and they're both to raise the minimum wage. And then on that, actually, no, that was Thursday. Friday is going to be the criminal justice bills, HB 66 and then HB 564. And then one of them would be relative to the use of deadly force by a law enforcement officer, and the other one would be prohibiting rubber bullets from being used in our state. So that's just this week. So as you could see, the house is like pretty busy trying to get stuff in and out. That's like good and bad, but like, because the house is so red, just so staunchly Republican, we've really had like a few disappointing blows already, like cannabis, I'm sure y'all saw, but we got over 1,000 people to sign up in support of the cannabis bill and cannabis legalization. Like over 70% of New Hampshire agrees that it should be legalized. And only 29 people opposed, and they retained it within the House. Like it's gone until next year. So just like a few really disappointing moments within our House, just them like blatantly not listening to the residents of New Hampshire, them just like really fitting their own agenda and what they want to do. So that's what's been up.
Do you have your sights? I know that there is a stand your ground bill being introduced. Do you have your sights on either Republicans in the committee or a constituency of Republicans that might oppose a stand your ground bill? Do you have a sense for what the chances of that going through are? And have you had any conversations at NHYM about organizing to oppose that?
So I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So stand your ground bill is when someone's on your property, whether or not you are legally allowed to kill them, right?
In essence, yeah. I think it also applies to in public if you feel threatened by someone, you're allowed to kill them. I'm not positive about that.
These are bills extending it to virtually wherever you are. If you feel threatened, you can use deadly force to protect yourself wherever you are.
That's horrible. I did not know that. Thank you for clarifying that, because I'm pretty sure I have had a discussion about this bill, but I did not know the details of this bill.
And actually, they're being heard on Friday in criminal justice, House Criminal Justice, and it happens that is Trayvon Martin's 26th birthday. And that's how, I'm forgetting. I remember Trayvon Zimmerman, but I can't remember whatever the killer's name was, the horrible guy. He got off because of a stand your ground defense. And so now they're trying to introduce that here in New Hampshire, and it's taking place on Trayvon Martin's birthday.
That's horrible. I'm gonna write that down so that I can remember to show up and testify for that.
Well, needless to say, you have your hands quite full. I'm not holding you responsible for not having the details on that particular bill. It was just one that I know I was interested in.
No, thank you for bringing it up. I'm glad I'm here.
So Erika, how, as an organizer, I am so amazed that you got 1,000 people to sign in on the cannabis bills. How did you guys do that?
Oh, okay. So basically, the ACLU, BLM, and NHYM all separately sort of put out the information on how to do it when it was happening, and just like how to testify, etc. So like part of my job is finding people to testify for bills that have a strong story that would be compelling for the committee to hear. But specifically, much like the trans bill that I showed you, I made an infographic. Help us legalize cannabis in New Hampshire. That got 1,800 likes. So it's like, it makes sense that many people would jump in when you have these 3 different organizations with big platforms sort of like amplifying something that people already agree with. So I'm sure on something that was less popular, it wouldn't have gotten so much of a response. But since cannabis is already such a popular thing in New Hampshire, of course, people were like, of course we have to legalize it if we can. And of course we have to do something if we could help. I thought right to work, that was today, right? And they denied it.
There's a good piece of news.
No, they
So
didn't
sorry.
deny it.
Oh, they didn't. It's
Yeah, I
moving
was
forward.
through.
They it came out of committee with a ought to pass vote, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Really
All right,
sad.
never mind. That's not good news. Andy, did you have something?
Oh, sure. I see Donna's hand. Why don't you go, Donna, and I'll go next.
Thanks, Andy. Erika, this is absolutely incredible. And I want you to talk to every group that I know. I mean, we don't know each other yet, but I'm really hoping that at some point we could be working together. And I have so many questions. I've been madly taking notes. But the question, and Louise kind of pointed in this direction, but I'm thinking a lot these days. I had the joy of spending most of my life working with teenagers and young adults, and now I actually teach graduate school. So I'm thinking a lot these days about what I did as a teacher, what I did working with adolescents, and how people who have the privilege of working with adolescents could be working in a way that creates critical consciousness and activism, social justice activism. And so I'm wondering what you would, I'm totally putting you on the spot, but what you would give, what would you say, for example, in a group of teachers, high school teachers and counselors, about what they could be doing to create the possibility for social justice activism and critical consciousness in their students? And just historical awareness, just like all of those pieces. Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like this is like, that was such a good question, because I actually have an answer. So basically, as far as your last point of like historical accuracy, I would say that the first step in that is just from like elementary school and on to stop lying to children. We should never learn that the Pilgrims and the Indians are just like shaking hands and loving each other. Like, we shouldn't learn about Thanksgiving in that way. Like, I should have never learned about Christopher Columbus and was like coloring in the Santa Maria and all of that. Like, when that man quite literally like colonized and raped the countries in that my ancestors are from. Like, it's just an insult to like people of color to be taught history in such a way. And for every single year, it was the most amazing thing every single year is just they tell you a little bit more of the truth. Every history class, every year. Oh, I hate to break it to you. Last year, you learned this really horrible thing. It gets worse. Like, it was actually really bad. Like, and it was just this really horrifying cycle of like, okay, I have to believe you in order to get the questions right on the test. Because if I tell the truth, then I'm wrong on the test and then my grade gets lower. So it's like, it just helps people understand more and it helps them become smarter people. Honestly, I feel like it would really help with sort of this like white way of seeing the world of like, oh, well, it couldn't have been that bad. If we learned slavery to the extent that we learned about the Holocaust, then no one would even bother saying that racism was not real. When our hair was used to stuff furniture, like, that's insane to me that we never learned that in school. Like, that's horrific. So that's just a start. But the other answer to your question of how can we sort of like create this activism within school? My high school teachers did this amazing thing, but then they messed it up. And I'm going to tell you how they messed it up. So they did this amazing thing of which when things were happening, we would talk about it. So I personally remember watching the story of Trayvon Martin on the news when I was young and thinking, this is horrible. Like, this hurts me. I don't understand why it hurts me. I don't completely understand why I don't think that it's fair. I don't understand why I believe that like Trayvon Martin shouldn't have died and why I don't believe this like white man who's saying that he was scared of him. Like, I don't know why I don't believe it, but I don't. And it feels wrong, but I didn't have the words to explain it. And it's like, when you are a teenager, you have the ability to feel everything, you have the ability to comprehend everything, but you don't necessarily have the vocabulary, the statistics to articulate what you're feeling in a way that makes people understand you and in a way that makes people take you seriously in your pain. That's something that you have to learn when you're older. But the thing that they did that was amazing is that they brought reality into the classroom. So it's like, okay, Trayvon Martin died. Let's walk through it. Like, let's walk through what happened. That was amazing. That's something that needed to happen. That's something that people needed to know. That same teacher wasn't moderating or mediating the conversation in the way that it needed to be. So it's like when you were talking about something that inflicts pain and trauma onto BIPOC people, right? You have to make sure that you're not hurting the people in the process. So it was amazing that we learned that in school. It was amazing that we were talking through it, but it became this discussion. It became, did Trayvon Martin deserve to live, or was he scary enough to die? And it's one of the things that like really traumatized me in high school. It was one of the things that really made me feel Black, was that conversation in high school of, did Trayvon Martin deserve to live, or was he scary enough to die? And I'll never forget it. And I'll never forgive that teacher for letting a white girl say, well, he was on someone's lawn. Like, I will never forgive him for that. So that's my answer to that question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, I loved your off-the-cuff remarks. You rambled in all the right directions. I really appreciated that. And I wanted to ask if you could give an update about what's going on with No Racist Granite State with the pledge and what the next steps are for that.
I would love to do that. Yes, so No Racist Granite State. I'm not sure what orgs all of you are in. Obviously you're in this org, but so basically, I'm sure you've all read the pledge. It's a very simple pledge. I don't know like how much detail y'all, I'm just gonna go really into it. Okay, so basically the pledge is simple so that we could make people look bad. That was the only reason the pledge was so simple. If we could fit in every single horrible thing that we could think of to stop someone in our house from participating in, like, we would have done it, but that wasn't the point. The point is, this is a pledge that very simply says, I will not be racist, I will not add to the racism, I will not add to the hate speech, and I will only vote for legislation that isn't racist. And if it is racist, I won't. And if my colleagues are racist, I'll say something about it. It's very simple. I won't be racist publicly is literally what that pledge says. So if you find yourself unable to sign it, then that says something about you. It says that you can't commit to being anti-racist while also being an elected official. And then if you do sign it, then we can use that pledge to hold you accountable. So someone like James Spillane, who so bravely signed the pledge after everything he's done. The only Republican actually so far to sign the pledge has been James Spillane, which is very interesting. We now can say, James Spillane, you've signed this pledge that says that you will be anti-racist. Personally, in my own opinion, the only way that he could actually apologize for what he's done is to resign. But we can say the next time he does something horrible, because he will, because he is, you know, a repeat offender, we can say, hey, you signed this pledge, like, resign. And that's the point of the pledge, is to use it sort of as this tool to hold our representatives accountable.
And so how many people have signed it, and what help could you use from people on this call in terms of continuing to push it forward?
I definitely do have the document of where everyone has signed it. Let me just take a little peek. Drive. Pledge signer is nice. I can't believe I found that so easily. That's actually incredible. So I can't really tell, I'm not gonna lie to you, how many people have signed it. A lot of the Democrats have. And like I said, only James Blaine has signed it on the Republican side. As far as what we can do, we're definitely still in the stages of like asking your representatives to sign it. We're definitely still in that stage. We're sort of in this in-between stage where we are trying to get the people who signed it off of the calling list so that they're no longer bothered, because obviously we don't want to bombard people who agree with us. And also we have gotten no's from multiple Republicans on the basis that they are Christian, so they can't be racist, on the basis that they don't see color, so they can't be racist, on the basis of all of these weird things. I don't know. I'm sure that at least one of the Democrats refused, but I don't know off the cuff who. I forgot what I was saying. Yeah, you want to ask me a question?
Anybody have anything? We've got just a few minutes left, so if you've got questions, ask them now.
I want to offer and wonder just that it was a real privilege for World Fellowship Center to host the Youth Peace of Mind retreat weekends. And when and if ever we're able to be together physically again, we would love to host, offer, be able to support other people facilitating their work here in a beautiful remote wilderness space that has a big dining room and rooms, cabins, tent sites, whatever would help people coming together. I think that space did create a space for people to be able to be together and get the time together to learn about where we are in the world and how we got here. And Will was just phenomenal in bringing people here and into that understanding, looking at capitalism with eyes wide open, the military industrial complex, like just all of it. And I know, having grown up as a rural youth, in a really conservative rural town, how that kind of space just can be transformative. So, whether there's, all weekends here can be available for youth anytime, but especially in the June and September are times when we don't have other programming going on and groups could be here. And we'd love to offer that.
Yeah, I think
Be there.
What's it called? What I want to say in response to that, first, I think that is amazing. And I also just want to add that, I would love to see youth movements branch out into these rural areas, because I know that there are kids out there, youth out there, adults out there that feel ostracized by their beliefs and feel sort of in their own little isolated pods. When really I think that that has a lot of potential. We have a lot of potential to grow up north.
Yeah, I agree. And we're reaching the end of our time together. So I want to give you an opportunity to give any closing thoughts. But before you do that, I just want to say I am so glad that Griffin forgot to put us in his calendar and is on vacation today, and that we were blessed with you tonight, Erika. You've been entertaining and informative, and I'm really appreciative of it. So. Before I do our closing and reminder of upcoming events, is there anything you want to say in closing, or we could probably do one more question if anyone's got one.
I just want to ask, how can we best be allies to youth? Those of us who are, a little bit gray haired, and how can we be the best partners and allies?
Awesome. I think that's a great question. I feel like I don't even know how to say this without almost sounding horrible, but basically I'm just I was raised, because I'm a Black woman, I was raised to think that old white people hated me and to be careful and just So whenever I come into these spaces, I'm actually extremely anxious because I am just like, I don't know how you're going to react to me. I don't know if this is like too much, if this is just like entirely too multicultural for you right now. But I honestly, like, this is a great first step. Like, I really appreciate just sort of like the breaking the boundaries and just like creating a group to listen and just sort of like hearing each other, because it's like, I appreciate that you like respect me and like how I speak. And I also want you guys to know that like I respect you. And I think that there needs to be that sort of like mutual respect before you can even like get into the fact that like of like allyship. You know what I mean? It sort of just needs to be like a I think that you're cool kind of thing, which sounds like kind of like funny and like lame, but like genuinely like sort of just this understanding of like, we're on the same page, we're on the same team, like I have your back kind of thing. Because that's like we are taught to have biases for a reason. Like they don't want old white people and like young Black girls to get along because then we would be too powerful. So I think that that's like the first step. And I think that y'all are doing a great job.
Thanks for that. That's really helpful. And I reiterate everything Will said. I mean, I love Griffin. He's wonderful, but this was also, you were exactly what I needed tonight. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erika.
Oh, you guys are so nice.
Thanks for being with us. And for everybody else on, please do join us every other Monday. We're going to continue to have these conversations even after everyone is vaccinated. We're going to have these as long as we can because they've had a really good response. So next week we're going to have Professor Eric Chaffetz. He's going to talk about the impact of American exceptionalism on culture and policy. After that, Kevin Martin, the National Executive Director of Peace Action, he's the National President of Peace Action, will talk about what the national priorities are at the moment. Then Andy Davis, who is on the call, is going to be joining us and talking about remaking the world one story at a time. So that's February 1st, February 15th, March 1st, and March 15th. And we are planning out into May and June now, which will be a year of conversations every other Monday. So again, thank you, Erika. What a blessing it was to have you with us, and your words and your humor and everything you brought it was a treasure. So thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you, Erika, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.